I just had a question as to what you guys see as a minimalist business. I've been running a catering/farmers market for the past farmers market booth for the past 3 years, and I'm wondering what you guys think about expansion and taking on debt to expand a business that you are very passionate about. I am also passionate about other things outside of life, outside of the restaurant life, so this is a good thing to be flexible and travel as well without a commitment of a brick and mortar. But to make a living from this, I have to work part-time and do the food booth part-time as well. It's not something that can sustain us for a long period of time without supplemental income.
I think that Johnny is doing something important here, and he's realizing something important. He's asking some good questions here. And I'll say bravo for starting your own business and not trying to take the giant leap of starting I must do this brick and mortar thing right away. It's not to say that that's the wrong thing to do. Ryan and I actually own a coffee shop, or we're part owners of a coffee shop down in St. Petersburg, Florida. It's a long story, but and it is a minimalist business for sure, and the aesthetic is minimalist, but also the way that we run it is minimalist. So Johnny's asking, how do I run a minimalist business? It kind of depends on what you mean by that. Do you mean like aesthetic minimalism, or in his case, I think he's meaning like the financial side of things. Now, for me, he talked about being passionate about this business. Yeah. And I think that debt can totally kill your passion.
Oh, yeah. And it limits your freedom, too. Yeah. Because if you go, all right, we took on this debt. Well, actually, I'd love to do this other thing. Or like maybe I'd like some free time. Or maybe we want to have kids. Well, can't do that. We owe $350,000 to the bank for this restaurant or this storefront.
And you become indebted to a particular lifestyle or work. Well, now I have to work 80 hours a week. Or I have to do this, as opposed to where you're at right now, Johnny, is I get to do this. I get to do the catering. I get to do the farmer's market. So if I'm defining a minimalist business, for me, 3 things stand out. And I think debt can be maybe the 4th thing here. You strive to be debt-free. I'm not saying it's impossible to run a minimalist business with debt. It just makes it a bit more difficult. Ryan and I don't do debt at all in our personal life or in our business life, but I could see there are some scenarios where you might take on, you're buying a building or something.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
I will always stand by. There is no such thing as good debt. I mean, it's funny because we say this all the time, and people will like send this really long email, like, well, it's just basically if you have a lot of money, like they'll give the example of Mark Zuckerberg, who bought a $50 million house and put it on a loan because he got a 3% interest rate, but he can collect 7% year over year on average with the stock market. And it's like, yes, okay, if you have millions and millions of dollars, maybe in that scenario, it might be smarter to take out a loan. But for all intents and purposes, everyone listening to this, I mean, there is no such thing as good debt.
And by the way, functionally, he doesn't even have debt then.
That's
he
right.
just has the money somewhere else.
Yes. That's right. For a guy like that, that house could implode and the insurance company could go, look, we are out of business, we can't pay you. And he would go, oh, all right. And his life wouldn't change at all. He'd be annoyed. Right? But if your storefront gets evaporated and you didn't have insurance on it and you still owed that debt, it would crush your life and your well-being, and you would never... Well, you would take a long time to recover from that. A long time.
So 3 things that define a minimalist business to me. One is your actions, or the actions of the business, align with the values of the business. Now, if you're a entrepreneur, solopreneur, it's probably your values as well. In fact, your business's values shouldn't be different from your own values, or at least appreciably different. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think every good business solves problems, and quite often people go the other way around. It's kind of what you were talking about earlier. Is like, hey, we have a bunch of solutions. Let's find the problems.
Yeah.
And the one solution was, let's take $1 from people every month, and
just silliness. Yeah.
And so I think every good business, or every good creative even, helps people solve problems. And the third thing that defines a minimalist business for me is it grows only when it makes sense. I think we're often told that like unlimited growth, we need to grow no matter what. That can be irresponsible. I mean, there are types of bad growth. A tumor is a type of bad growth, and we don't want that in our business, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I think about, being a minimalist, it's it's not about just being a monk and shaving your head and like having nothing. I mean,
you
it's
certainly haven't shaven. Neither of you guys are interested in that.
No. And that's because, Josh and I, we're not really concerned with the amount of items that people own. It's more about, are people living deliberately? Because we live in such an impulsive society, especially with all the advertisements we see and the pressures from society and success. We got to be successful. I mean, we have all these things that really make us not be so deliberate. So with Johnny here, man, I would say if you can avoid debt, Johnny, avoid the debt. Now, there are some debts that are better than others. Payday loan is going to be much worse than a 7-year fixed mortgage. I mean, there are definitely better debt. There's better debt to get in than others. So, I mean, if Johnny has to get into debt, I don't know, man. How could we help Johnny reason to get in debt? I mean, is there a reason? I guess maybe that's a better quality question.
It goes back to that gal in Dallas, right? Like, if Johnny has to get in debt, then maybe he's lying to himself.
Yeah, or it has to materially affect in a positive way, and this is just my opinion, his quality of life. So if he hates that he has to work part-time, and the bottleneck is his personal time, and he would love to run a brick and mortar business, and he thinks that's going to be great, but he would need a loan to do it, that's something to consider. But if he's just going, all my friends say that I should grow this business, or I feel humiliated having to work part-time, then we're talking about ego issues. Definitely not a good reason to borrow $300,000 from Chase, right? It reminds me of this parable. You guys have probably said this 1,000 times on the show, so stop me if you have. There's this executive flies down, and there's a guy fishing, and he goes out and fishes, and he goes, hey, if you just worked a little harder, instead of just fishing all day, you could buy another boat, and then you could buy another boat, and then everybody else could be fishing all day, and you could work a couple of years of 80-hour weeks, and then you'd own the company, and then you could just retire and fish all day. And the guy's like, yeah, that's what I'm doing, right? And I sort of butchered this parable, but the idea is people work really, really, really hard, and they're ending up doing the exact same thing in retirement as they could do now.
Yeah.
The difference, of course, is if he hates what he's doing now because there's elements that he could get out of with a couple of years of hard work and a little bit of debt, then yes. But if you're just praying that the stars align and you don't fail, which is what a lot of brick and mortar food or restaurant businesses are, you're just rolling the dice, and it can be really dangerous because then you have the debt, but then you're working 3 part-time jobs and you're doing the farm cart and you don't get to keep the money. It's going back to Chase.
Yeah. Well, according to Forbes, I was just reading this recently in preparation for this. There's when 90% of businesses fail in the first 5 years, and we hear this similar stat all the time, and that is, I think, both bad news and good news. Yeah. The good news is if you fail, you can move on, start something else. The good news is that a lot of other people are failing, and you can learn from their lessons as well. Yeah. And so if you look at people who have taken whatever template, the farmer's market thing, or if you wanted to start a brick and mortar store, you can look at that template and say, what have people done well? What have people done poorly? I remember when I first left the corporate world, I was 30 years old, and it was after 12 years in telecom, and I managed 150 retail stores.
Oh my gosh.
Which I know is really ironic with the whole minimalism
well,
thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is pre-minimalism, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And well, toward the end of it, as when I first embraced minimalism, Ryan and I were both in the corporate world working at the same telecom company, and I realized like this didn't align with the person I wanted to be, and I just wanted to go write fiction. I'd written fiction throughout my 20s. That was the thing I wanted to do, and I had people at work, like when I finally decided to quit, I put in several months' notice, had a whole transition plan, and people came up to me and said, but where are you really going? Like, they thought I was going to a competitor or something, right? Because
take me with you.
Yeah, and I'm like, I can't. I'm just going to go write. And I had more than one person say, if anyone could just quit their job and be a writer, everyone would do it. And I'm like, you realize there are some people who make a living from writing, right? Yeah. This is the first time this has ever happened.
That's right. Yeah.
And but what I realized is that there is a template. People earn a living from doing what I wanted to do, and I could find several different recipes, tweeze out the ingredients that work for me, learn from other people's failures, and that's because a lot of people do fail along the way to success. And so maybe we can talk about some of the failures that you've gone through, Jordan, in the past that have gotten you to the successes that you have right now.
Yeah, I think every time I think something is successful and then I look back at it later, I'm like, well, there's a little asterisk next to it where it's like, that didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to. And I'm not one of those everything happens for a reason type of guys, but I am one of those you can take a lesson from anything type of guys.
Yeah.
So when I look back, it makes it, that's a good idea, by the way, because it makes it really hard to regret stuff. It makes it really hard to regret stuff if you focus on the lesson that you get from things, which I know is easier said than done, because this isn't a fortune cookie where you can just be like, oh, there's a lesson in everything? Good. I don't feel bad about any of my decisions now. I mean, I wish that were the case. But when I look back at, let's say, starting a business that was focused around dating and relationships, that was not the ideal business for me to start because I quickly lost interest in that. And what I was really interested in was human behavior. But starting a vaguely human behavior related business was not really something that was going to work for me. But my biggest quote unquote failure is probably the idea that I went to college, tried to get a job at Best Buy, couldn't really get a computer repair job. They wanted me to sell CDs, and I was like standing next to a life-size cutout of Britney Spears and just being like, what happened to my life after a 4-year degree from the University of Michigan? And then I went to law school because I thought, well, the solution to this problem is more education,
right?
Which, speaking of debt, is basically the same thing. Going to law school or grad school in general, because you feel like you don't have enough education and not because you're interested in the topic, is the worst idea. But it makes sense if you look at our parents' generation, because half of them, or more than half, probably didn't even go to college. So it was like, hey, if you go to college, you're going to get a great job. Well, if you extrapolate from that, if you go to grad school, you're going to get a better job than people who just went to college, who are going to get better jobs than people who just went to high school. Now, though, the part they don't tell you, grad school at a really top school is probably like $150,000 for 3 years. So that, speaking of limiting your freedom, I was like, I don't even want to be a lawyer, but I'm going to get this great legal education. And then towards the end, I got job offers from Wall Street, and I was like, no way, man. I'm going to do my own thing. I might work for the government because then I can go travel and do all this cool stuff. And it's like, here's what you're going to get paid from the government. Here's what you're going to get paid on Wall Street. Oh, and by the way, your level of debt, if you work for the government, you're going to pay it off in 87 years. And if you work for Wall Street, you can pay it off in like 5 years. And it was like, oh, cool. Well, I'm only going to work on Wall Street as long as I need to. And then you start doing the math and you're like, 4 years when you're 27 is a long time. And you keep going and you keep going. And this is not news for you two guys from coming from corporate. You get these golden handcuffs. And I luckily avoided this because the economy took a huge dive.
Yeah.
But guys that had started a couple years before me, they're working on Wall Street and they're like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to get a boat because that boats are cool and I'm really bored of my job and I can then go to this boat every weekend. And then they're like, well, I should just get a house in the Hamptons and park my boat there. And then I'm going to get married and have kids. And well, my wife doesn't want to take a lifestyle hit and she's taking care of the kids. So you got these, we call them golden handcuffs because it looks like your life is awesome. But then if you wake up one day and you go, I am sick of this corporate BS, then you go, well, wait a minute, 2 mortgages, a boat, 2 kids, I've got to take care of my family. And that's if you were responsible, right? Imagine the guys who just bought a bunch of shoes. Like those guys are totally screwed.
Right? They got no assets. Remember every time someone in our that worked with us, when they would get a house or they would get a car, like our boss, he would be like, keep getting buried in debt because he knew that he could treat that person worse. He could put them through the ringer because they were beholden to that paycheck to pay all the debt payments.
Like, you're getting overtime. Everybody's getting overtime.
I remember
overtime.
The flagship store, that you managed at one point in time in Centerville, Ohio. I pulled up once. I was at the time I was a regional manager for like 16 stores, and I pulled up in my Lexus, and one of 2, and I pulled up, and there were 2 Hummers, a Corvette, and a Mercedes. And these were all frontline retail employees.
Yeah.
What?
I know, right?
Weren't Hummers like 70 grand back in the day?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
What on earth is going on here?
Well, right. Massive amounts of unsustainable debt is what was going on.
Yeah,
they're like, I made a few good commission checks. I can prove that I can afford the debt payment on this thing.
Right.
And this was also at peak insanity. Peak insanity being like, well, we can stretch this to a 63-month term. and you can afford to pay for this Hummer with your retail job, as long as no other emergency ever happens in your life over the next 63 months, then you'll own this Hummer.
63 months. And they do the months thing because every number after 12, you're like, okay, right? Like, you're like, that's a year. And then you're like, wait, 63, holy crap.
Might as well be 100 months.
Yeah,
right.
My kids are going to be driving this thing.
Yeah,
man.
exactly. And so the one other stat that's worth talking about, our friend TK Coleman, he's doing these series that sort of against the arguments. I think he calls it the Bad College Argument Tour. He's going out to like colleges and like dealing with people's best objections about why should you get into debt to go to college, and there are some good objections out there. One is like, well, that people who, on average, people with a as you just said, people with a degree earn more than people without a degree, which is true on average, but it also conflates causation with correlation there.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, I think the stat was 71% of people with graduate degrees are currently underemployed.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And so you now you have $100,000 worth of debt, and you're doing a job that didn't require the degree that got you into $100,000 worth of debt.
It's probably because 99.9% of graduate schools don't train you for an actual trade, right? That stat I obviously made up. But think about this. If you have a PhD in statistics, you might go to work for a firm that you might become like an insurance executive or something like that, but probably you're going to start off doing something that somebody who has a BA in English is also doing. Right. And I might, whatever, if I got that particular subject area wrong, fine, replace it with any other graduate school subject area that's not engineering, computer engineering, law, medicine, or something that readily prepares you for an actual job. So if you're going to be a doctor, yeah, you got to borrow some dough, but you're going to be a physician. You're going to get employment somewhere.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But if you're going and you're like, I just really love, I'm trying not to say English, but that's the first one that comes to mind that is quote unquote useless. You're going to end up with the same job as somebody else who just has a basic college degree in almost every case, unless you are really crafty.
And the reason that we get there is we're told that, well, in order to be successful, you need to go to college and get this underwater bubblegum chewing degree.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And now you
can chew bubblegum underwater, and now you can be a barista.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's where we end up. And then you start looking like where Johnny is right now, and you say, okay, in order for me to feel free, I need to start my own thing. Mm-hmm. I need to have. I want to do my own thing because of the job that I'm working. It's no longer fulfilling. It's not satisfying. And I guess the last bit of advice I would have for Johnny is, part of it has to do with a plan. But you've already figured out what direction you want to go in. Mm-hmm. Now the question is, how can you get there and still make it something that you love doing? Yeah. A few months ago, Ryan, we did a podcast episode with Paul Johnson from a band called Canyon City, and one of our favorite musicians, and he actually opened up for us this summer on tour. And one of the things that he did is he messed up. When he first moved to Nashville to do music, he signed this big recording contract and started doing like all these jingles for Coca-Cola and stuff. And
well, I mean, it was like
not too bad.
Yeah, and he finally made it, man. Like he had, someone offering him money. He's a paid musician, so that was his goal. Mm-hmm. And that's
he hated it. And it turned the thing that he loved into this thing that he hated because he was now beholden.
Jobs will do that.
Yeah.
You turn your hobby into it. People are always like, then I can be a professional XYZ. And I'm like, ooh.
That's a really good way to kill your passion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really, really good way to destroy the one thing that you enjoy doing in the world.
So maybe to sum it up is, I think a minimalist business never puts money first, but also we have to keep in mind that money is going to be part of the equation. We'd be lying to ourselves if you're running a business saying, I don't need to make money.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. It's just when it becomes the primary driver for doing what we do, that's when it kills our creativity, it kills our passion, and it kills our life.
Yeah. I really like what you said. The advice you had for Johnny is like, ask himself why he wants to open this up. Why does he want to take out this debt? And then Josh, to your point about, does this align with the person that he wants to become? So Johnny, ask yourself why it is that you want to grow your business, and does it align with the person that you want to become? What I'll say though, I mean, no matter what, I mean, whether Johnny takes out debt or not, I hope he can avoid it. But regardless, as long as he has a plan, and as long as he's working in that plan and it doesn't go against his values, I mean, he's probably on the right track.
Yeah. I think one last tip, if I may, is do not quit that part-time job that you have, Johnny, until you're the bottleneck in whatever it is and you can't outsource anything else. Because there's this trend among entrepreneurs now and they're YouTubers and Instagrammers that are like, quit your job, go all in. And I'm like, wait a minute, did you follow that advice? First of all, probably not. Secondly, why do that? You're burning the ships for absolutely no reason. You're adding a ton of stress. What? So you can tell your mom, like, look, I'm a full-time entrepreneur. I don't even have a regular job now. Fine. Why, though?
Right.
Why? You're just adding stress. Keep that part-time job, because if things go downhill and you hit a slow season, or, oh my gosh, the supplier screwed us over and now the money's gone and we're waiting for them to refund it, but we didn't get the product, you can probably scale up those part-time hours and survive. And you don't have to worry about it. People go, oh, I'm quitting my job. What are you doing all day? Well, I have social media to take care of. I've got this to take care of. If you work at Taco Bell and you're making $15 an hour, fine, quit your job, do it yourself. If you have a job that's paying you a decent wage and it's not killing you, like literally, keep it and then hire someone else to do that social media, which, by the way, has like zero ROI for your business.
Absolutely.
And then have them do it. And then when you find that you just can't outsource anything else anymore because it's the amount of finite energy that you have to do whatever it is you specialize in. You know, it makes sense for you guys not to have corporate jobs and to do your shows and to create all the films and all the podcasts that you're creating. Only you can do that. But if you're sitting there answering all your tweets and it's taking you 4 hours a day, pay Jordan to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
He'll do it.
Yeah, and we outsourced that years ago, and I think you brought up a really good point with the social media thing. Our friend Matt Diavella, who directed our documentary Minimalism that's on Netflix, he did this 30-day fast recently. I've been telling him for over a year, like that exactly what you just said. Hey, there's very little ROI, and there's some value you can gain from it. Yeah. But if you're looking at it as the primary driver for your creativity, man, that is misspent time. And I'll tell you, very recently, since he walked away from social media, he has been killing it, adding immense value because he's a genius filmmaker, and so he's doing these little 5 to 10 minute videos on YouTube, and they're all getting millions of views.
Wow.
And
That's great.
and it's from walking away from this thing and adding immense value. So ultimately, whatever Johnny's going to do or whatever someone listening to this is going to do, you have to remember that adding value to people, minimalist business is people focused, whether it's your customers or clients or readers or viewers or listeners, but also the people you work with, and being people focused, creating an outstanding experience for the people you work with, but creating outstanding quality of whatever you're producing for the people that you're solving their problems.
Do you guys find that social media was bad for you when you were doing it?
I mean, social media helps spread the message because, I mean, it turns out Facebook is where a lot of stuff is happening. So it's a great vehicle to use for certain aspects of the minimalists to kind of spread, our story, to spread our message. Twitter is more, we use it for different reasons. But I think that is what we've done with social media is we will take Twitter, we'll take Facebook, we're on Instagram, and we will use each vehicle deliberately. It's not like we send out a tweet and then it goes to our Facebook and then it goes to our Instagram.
Yeah.
Each vehicle is used for a different reason. So I think it does. I mean, personally, I don't have a personal Facebook account because that does nothing for me.
Sure.
But as far as the minimalists go, I feel like it does add a lot of value to a lot of people, and it is a way to kind of get our word out there.
I think that, so at the beginning of the year, we took a step back and we were doing just that. We realized like the definition of insanity is doing, the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. We were doing that. We were like posting everything in triplicate, where it was like, well, here's our Twitter post. Let's repost that on Facebook and repost it on Instagram.
I was doing that too.
And
doesn't work.
And so at the beginning of the year, Jessica, who runs our social media, and she's really amazing, really talented artist. In fact, she used to curate like museums and galleries.
Wow.
And so she's a curator of things, and she does a really good job of this. And so at the beginning of the year, we literally deleted all of our social media. I went back, she deleted all the tweets, all the Instagram photos, started with a blank slate. And we came up with a new plan. Like, we're only going to use Instagram for beautiful photos that will add value to people with like these short captions that Ryan and I write. Facebook is great for sharing links and articles, right? Twitter is great for sharing only text. We don't share any links or any photos on Twitter. And by creating these arbitrary restrictions, we've been a lot more creative using those platforms. But using those to augment what we're already creating, they're not the main creation.
That makes sense. For me, I just found as a creator, it sort of started to drain me, especially Instagram, because I was like, oh, I have to make a video now. Oh, wait, it's over a minute. I've got to rewrite it. And I was just like, why am I doing this instead of making a show that people actually care about? Why am I trying to figure out how to shoehorn my creativity into this format? And I agree, the formats are important to get the message out, but beyond that, I just didn't want to become an Instagram influencer.
Right.
I wanted to just do the show. And I found, surprisingly, YouTube, which I usually hated, is actually really fun. Like what we're doing right now, filming the show and repurposing it this way and having people see how we interact, that's been much more fun. But trying to figure out like, hey, quick, speak faster, only we're going to do this as a selfie and then give a quick tip. It's just, it sort of made me tired by 11 a.m. and I didn't want to do anything else.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to force it, it's definitely going to be tiring. I mean, yeah, the other thing with social media too is it can feel like it's productive. Like you can feel like you're getting a lot of work done. Totally. Same thing with email. It's like you can spend, 6 hours making the perfect Instagram video, catching up on all your emails, putting the perfect tweet out there, crafting the perfect Facebook message. But at the end of the day, it's like, what did you really get done?
Yeah, guilty.
Right.
Yeah,
Are you familiar with our friend?
I think we
Cal
all are a little
Newport?
bit.
Of course, yeah. Cal,
so he's got a new book coming out called Digital Minimalism.
I was wondering if you guys are going to jump on that.
And he's we've done a few events with him in the past, and he's like, he's never been on social media, but exactly what Ryan's talking about here. Those things ape the form of productivity. So by the end of the day, you're like, I'm exhausted. I did so many tweets and responded to so many bullshit
What a
emails.
productive day.
Look at all these likes I got.
Yeah.
Do you see how many emails lists I unsubscribed from? I'm so productive.
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like, but you're not actually creating the thing you set out to create.
Right.